Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are stepping into the damp fields of Maryland, where dawn rises heavy with mist and the sound of iron scraping soil. You open your eyes to a childhood already shackled, born into chains, where freedom isn't a word yet, just a distant echo. A baby girl is swaddled in rough cloth, her name Araminta Ross. Later she will rename herself Harriet, but for now she is Minty, the daughter of enslaved parents, her earliest memories shaped by orders barked and backs bent. You probably won't survive a childhood like this, one where play is replaced by toil before you even learn to count. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. The plantation around you hums with a rhythm of survival. You feel the sting of cold mornings, the ache of bare feet in frost, the scratch of rough linen against skin. The cries of children aren't for toys, but for mothers dragged away to the fields before dawn. Harriet, Minty as she's called, is small, but she notices everything. She sees the way her father, Ben Ross, knows the forest like a second skin, how he can read moss on trees and navigate by the stars. She hears her mother, Rit, tell stories by the fire, her voice steady, even as chains rattle outside. These are the first lessons Minty learns: how to endure, how to listen, how to hope when hope is forbidden. The authoritative fact to anchor the moment: Harriet Tubman was born around 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, into slavery. Her parents, both enslaved, passed down not property, but resilience and faith. She grew up in a world where families could be broken at an owner's whim, where brothers and sisters might vanish with the next auction. She's put to work young, hired out to different households where cruelty runs casual. Minty is beaten for the smallest misstep, crying when hungry, falling asleep from exhaustion, failing to keep a baby quiet. One mistress once whipped her 5 times before breakfast. The scars stay, but beneath the hurt grows a stubbornness, a refusal to bow. You can almost see her jaw set, small hands balled into fists, a fire rising even as her body aches. Odd fact to keep your eyes open: Tubman's childhood nickname was Minty, short for Araminta. She dropped it later when she remade herself, but in these early years, Minty was the name called when lashes fell, when chores piled up, when her small figure struggled under heavy loads. The cops still debate whether she inherited her rebellious spirit purely from her parents' defiance, or whether the harshness of those early days hardened her faster than most. What's certain is that even as a child, she dreamed of freedom, whispering prayers for deliverance that seemed impossible. At night, lying on a straw mat, she stares at cracks in the cabin roof where starlight seeps through. Maybe one day she'll follow those stars. Maybe one day she'll run. For now, she listens to the adults talk in hushed tones, hears the names of abolitionists spoken like secret spells, and she stores it all away. Life here is brutal, but you feel it. Minty is already different. Even as a child, she carries herself with a weight beyond her years, as if the fields cannot crush what the sky has already chosen to lift. You sense she's destined for something larger, though no one could guess that the little girl born into chains will one day become the general who never lost a passenger.
The years crawl, and the work grows heavier. You're walking beside Minty now, still just a girl, but already bent beneath loads that would buckle grown men. Chains may not dangle from her ankles every day, but the weight of slavery sits on her shoulders like an anvil. And then, it happens, the moment that scars her forever, body and spirit alike. She's in a general store, sent on an errand she can't refuse. A young man enslaved by another master runs in, desperate to escape his overseer. The overseer demands Minty help restrain him, and when she refuses, he hurls a 2-pound weight meant for the runaway. It misses him, but it doesn't miss her. The iron crashes against her skull, dropping her to the ground. The authoritative fact for tonight: Harriet Tubman suffered a traumatic head injury as a teenager. The blow fractured her skull and left her with lifelong seizures, headaches, and sudden sleeping spells where she would fall unconscious without warning. Yet out of this wound came something more: visions, dreams she interpreted as divine messages. She came to believe she was guided by God Himself, and that faith never wavered. Lying on the dirt floor, blood pooling, Minty drifts in and out of darkness. She hears voices far away, sees light that isn't there, images that burn brighter than the pain. She survives, but she is never the same. For the rest of her life, she will carry not just the scar, but the gift of visions, moments when she seems to see what others cannot. Odd fact to tilt the scene: after that injury, Tubman grew much shorter than her childhood height suggested she would, about 5 feet tall as an adult. People sometimes underestimated her because of her size. They didn't realize that beneath the small frame beat the heart of a lioness. The cops still debate whether her trances were purely neurological consequences of the head trauma, temporal lobe epilepsy perhaps, or whether, as she insisted, they were revelations from God. Either way, she listened to them with absolute conviction, letting them steer her choices like a compass. You see her now staggering to her feet after the injury, head throbbing, eyes half clouded. She should have collapsed back into despair, but she doesn't. Instead, the visions harden her resolve. Freedom isn't just a wish anymore, it's a calling. She begins to pray more fervently, whispering to God in the fields, asking not just for herself, but for her people. She asks for courage, for strength, for a path out of bondage. Odd fact to tilt the scene: you imagine trying to tell Harriet to just rest after the head injury. She'd probably glare at you, stand up, and start planning a jailbreak anyway. Light joke number 2. You picture her explaining her visions to a modern neurologist who would nervously scribble "seizures" while she calmly said, "No, sir, that was God." Light joke number 3. You think of how TikTok would handle her story today. Half the comments arguing about science, half writing "Queen energy" under every clip. Back in the fields, Minty works slower now, partly because of the injury, partly because she simply won't be rushed. She falls into trances, yes, but she also falls into strength. Her arms roping with muscle, her endurance outlasting others. Pain becomes her shadow, but faith becomes her light. She tells friends she dreams of escaping north. Some shake their heads, warning her it's impossible. But she only nods quietly, eyes far away, as if she can already see herself walking through darkness towards freedom. That blow to the head could have ended her life before it began. Instead, it lit the fuse. The visions it left behind will guide her through swamps, rivers, and forests, warning her of danger, urging her to move or stay still. In the story of Harriet Tubman, suffering does not close the door. It kicks it open to a destiny bigger than chains.
The seasons pass, and you can feel something stirring inside Minty that no overseer can whip out of her. She still works the fields, still carries logs and traps muskrats in the marshes, still cooks when commanded, but the whisper of escape is everywhere, carried like smoke through the cabins at night. Families speak in hushed tones after dark, voices trembling with both fear and hope. And Minty listens, her ears sharper than most, her heart drumming louder than any warning. Her injury has left her with more than pain. It's left her with visions. Sometimes in the middle of work, she freezes, eyes turned upward, murmuring prayers. She sees flashes, a path through pine forests, a river gleaming by starlight, a horizon that feels like salvation. To her, these aren't daydreams, they're promises. Authoritative fact: by her late teens and early 20s, Harriet Tubman, still known as Minty, began hearing more about freedom from the enslaved community around her. She learned about the Underground Railroad, an informal network of safe houses and guides stretching northward to free states and even Canada. She also absorbed African American spirituals, which carried coded messages. Songs like "Go Down Moses" and "Wade in the Water" weren't just prayers, they were instructions, maps hidden in melody. Odd fact: Tubman reportedly used an owl's call as one of her secret signals during her rescue missions. Imagine hearing a lone bird in the woods at midnight, only to realize it was a woman guiding you to freedom. The cops still debate whether Minty first considered running because of personal cruelty from her masters or because she believed God had chosen her. The truth may be both. She endured brutal treatment, but she also carried a conviction that her life belonged to something greater than one plantation. She begins to pray dangerously bold prayers, not just for deliverance someday, but for deliverance soon, and not just for herself, but for her people. She prays her master will relent or die. When he dies suddenly, not long after, some whisper that Minty's prayers had power. She doesn't deny it. She only nods quietly, eyes blazing, more convinced than ever that God hears her directly. At night, she lies on her straw mat, listening to frogs croak in the swamps outside. She traces the stars through the cracks in the roof. She knows which one points north, the North Star, Polaris, the faithful beacon. She whispers to it like a friend. One day, she breathes, "I will follow you." Light joke number 1. You imagine Harriet explaining to a modern hiker that she navigated by the stars, while the hiker stares at their GPS with 3% battery left. Light joke number 2. You picture her hearing coded songs and thinking, "That's genius," while you can't even remember your Wi-Fi password. Light joke number 3. You think about her praying boldly for her master's end. Today, she'd get banned from Twitter for violating community guidelines. But behind the humor is the steel. Minty is no longer just a young enslaved woman dreaming of escape. She is a woman making plans. She asks questions when no one is looking. Which rivers run north? Which swamps hide trails? Who can be trusted along the way? She begins storing scraps of information, the way other girls her age store scraps of fabric. Her faith and her injury-wrought visions give her courage, but it's her sharp mind, honed by years of watching and listening, that truly prepares her. One evening she walks into the marsh, feet sinking in the mud, frogs croaking around her, and she closes her eyes. In the rhythm of insects and water, she hears a promise: "You will not stay here forever." Her fists clench, her breath steadies. Chains may rattle today, but one night soon, she will slip them. The whispers of escape have grown into a roar in her chest, and soon she'll have no choice but to follow it.
The night finally comes when whispers can't be ignored anymore. You are with her as she slips out of the cabin, heart pounding louder than her footsteps, the moon her only lantern. Every shadow looks like an overseer, every branch crack like a gun cocking. Minty, soon to be Harriet, has chosen the only direction left, north. Her legs carry her into the marshes first, because the swamps are both enemy and ally. Mud sucks at her feet, mosquitoes stab at her skin, but the trees hide her from the patrols that prowl the roads. She keeps low, moving by instinct and memory of her father's forest lessons. She knows which moss grows on the north side of trees. She knows which creeks run quietly, which ones roar. And above all, she knows the steady point of the North Star, glimmering through breaks in the canopy. The authoritative fact: Harriet Tubman made her first escape in 1849. She traveled by night through Maryland's tangled woods and marshes, eventually reaching Philadelphia, over 90 miles of treacherous terrain. She had no maps, only her knowledge of the land, her faith, and the secret help of the Underground Railroad. She moves cautiously, singing softly under her breath. Not hymns this time, but coded songs. "I'll meet you in the morning," she hums, a tune meant for others listening in the dark. Every verse is both a prayer and a password. Odd fact, to break the fear: she sometimes used disguises on her journeys, dressing as an old woman or even as a man. On this first trip, though, she has only the cloak of night and her unshakable will. The cops still debate whether she traveled entirely alone on that first escape or had help from local conductors along the way. The records are fragmentary, and Harriet herself told the story differently at different times. What no one debates is that she made it, and once she tasted freedom, she refused to keep it to herself. You feel the danger press closer. Dogs bark in the distance. Riders pass along the road. She freezes in the reeds, praying silently. A vision flashes. Wait, stay low, let the moment pass. When the danger fades, she rises again, mud smeared on her dress, and presses forward. Light joke number 1. You imagine Harriet today turning off the location services on her phone like it's the 21st century equivalent of slipping into a swamp. Light joke number 2. You picture her friends asking for her location, and she just sends a star emoji. North Star, obviously. Light joke number 3. You imagine her in modern sneakers instead of bare, swollen feet, and the ad campaign would sell out instantly. Freedom Runners, inspired by Harriet Tubman. After nights of this, mud, hunger, fear, she emerges at last into the outskirts of Pennsylvania. The land looks the same, the trees still wave, the rivers still run. But there's one radical difference. Here, slavery has no claim on her. She crosses into Philadelphia and breathes the free air for the first time. She later says, "When I found that I had crossed that line, I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. There was such a glory over everything." You stand beside her in that moment, watching the sunrise. She is exhausted, clothes torn, stomach empty, but her eyes blaze with a new fire. She is no longer Minty, the girl beaten into obedience. She is a woman remade in defiance. And though she stands here free, her thoughts already turn backward, not to stay, but to return. Because Harriet Tubman has found her freedom, and she knows others are still waiting in the dark.
You step onto Philadelphia's streets with her, the city rising like a hymn sung in brick and cobblestone. The air smells of river and coal, of bakery heat and horse sweat, and you feel the strange, trembling quiet that follows terror, the way a body, even after outpacing dogs and men, still listens for pursuit. She stands very still, then looks down at her hands the way she said she did, turning them in the new light, checking for proof that freedom is not a rumor, but a climate. Same hands, different weather. She makes a choice before noon. The girl called Araminta, Minty, unlaces that name the way you unlace a boot after a long march and sets it carefully by the door of the past. She takes her mother's name, Harriet, like a mantle. It settles on her shoulders and fits. For the surname, she keeps Tubman, the name of the husband she married back in Maryland, because names are also roots, and this one will carry her across more than miles. Authoritative fact, steady as a handrail. She was born Araminta Ross, married John Tubman in Maryland, and after her escape in 1849, she began calling herself Harriet Tubman. Harriet for her mother, Tubman from that marriage that would soon split under the strain of freedom. She breathes. She is Harriet. You begin again with her. The streets are grid she does not yet know, but she understands orientation. Find the river, then the rail yards, then the churches. Freedom has stairs, and she intends to climb. She finds work, anything that pays and does not cost her soul. Kitchens first, chopping, stirring, carrying water until the muscles in her arms forget the field's lash and remember the kitchen's rhythm. Hotels too, scrubbing floors that echo with gentlemen's shoes and ladies' laughter that doesn't reach the service hall. Laundry, where steam beads on her brow and soap eats at her knuckles, but money, for once, points north. She saves coins like a general stockpiles ammunition. You notice the watchfulness never leaves. She keeps her hat low, her steps quiet, her eyes measuring doorways and alleys as if every corner might be a test. People in the abolition halls take note of her, but she takes note first. William Still, clerk of the Philadelphia Vigilance Committee, records arrivals and routes with a pen that moves like a lantern. She goes to him not to be accounted for, but to account for the next journey. She has learned the one great lie of comfort. It tries to make you forget who is still missing. Odd, off-topic fact to wink at the streets you're walking. In the mid-1800s, Philadelphia's working poor ate oysters the way later cities eat pizza, cheap, everywhere, and sometimes for breakfast. Imagine Harriet, pockets tight with saved coins, passing an oyster seller and deciding that today, every cent goes to tomorrow's ticket instead. You sit with her on a church bench one evening. The candles tremble, the hymn rises, and she closes her eyes, not because she is tired, though she is, but because prayer here works differently. It's strategy as much as solace. She thanks God for the road behind and asks, with the practical boldness that frightens timid saints, for maps to the road ahead. You can feel the room change around her. Even in silence, she seems to be listening to lines you can't hear, a score written over the moment in invisible ink. Light joke number 1. If budgeting apps existed, she'd break them. Category: Freedom Fund, 100% of income. Category: anything else? Please see Freedom Fund. Light joke number 2. You imagine a street vendor offering her a discount and she politely declines because the full price buys one more mile for someone she hasn't met yet. Light joke number 3. A tailor begs her to try on a bright dress, and she says, "Sir, the only color I need is the dark," and the tailor retires from sales to reconsider his life choices. The cops still debate whether she connected with Still and the Vigilance Committee immediately upon arrival or only after her first season of work, whether her earliest movements in the city were guided by abolitionist networks or by the ferocious compass of her own instincts. What's certain is that she never intended Philadelphia to be a destination. It was a staging ground. Freedom for her is a verb. When the work in the kitchen slows, she takes a job farther east, New Jersey shore towns like Cape May, where summer hotels pay cash and the ocean teaches a different kind of horizon.
She watches the tide and thinks of time, how it withdraws and returns, how absence can be a promise. She pockets her wages and writes no letters. Letters can be intercepted. She carries the map in her head and the plan in her chest. Night after night, she rehearses the route in whispers: swamps again, ferry again, safe house, Quaker barn, rail yard, church cellar, river, star. She meets people who will become waypoints, conductors who speak in hymn fragments, station masters who bake rescue into the bread. She trades stories the way soldiers trade signals: low, fast, memorized. She tests her new name like a password and finds doors opening inside it. Another authoritative pulse to hold. Philadelphia in these years is a hub of the Underground Railroad. Still's records will later chronicle hundreds of fugitives, names and notes that make an atlas of courage. Harriet walks through those ledgers like a shadow with a lantern, intent on adding lines not inked yet. You notice how the city tries to domesticate her. Wages, a rented room, a pattern that says stay. But she stands at the wash basin at dawn and hears the old songs and the water slap, steal away, swing low, and the melodies are maps again. She cannot not hear. The room's four walls feel like a temporary station. The bed is a bench between trains. The future is humming. Go back, and the hum is the same pitch as the visions that began with the iron weight that nearly ended her. Odd glimpse of gentleness. She learns which streets smell like bread at 5 a.m., which alleys carry the river's cool into August heat, which market stall will slip an extra apple into a pocket if the buyer's eyes say, saving for a ticket. She gathers kindness the way she gathers coin, quietly and with intent. She buys a shawl that will hide her face. She chooses a bonnet that can shadow her features. She studies the way older women walk, the way men carry their shoulders, practices both, because disguise is a grammar she plans to speak fluently. She tests boots for silence and decides which creek crossings will drink the sound of footsteps best. The city's bells mark hours, but her clock is different. Harvest cycles back in Maryland, patrols rotations, the winter window when nights are long and farm work slackens, the calendar of risk and mercy. She waits, because waiting is also moving when you do it right. Her savings cross the threshold she set, enough for travel, bribes, food, loss. She prays one more time, not for safety, but for accuracy. And then she does the smallest, bravest thing. She tells the truth to herself without blinking. I cannot stay. She says it out loud in an empty room, and the room understands. She blows out the candle, and the dark answers back like an ally. You stand beside her and feel it too. That freedom without the rescue of others is only half a sentence. She is a new name with an old vow. Go back and bring them. When she steps into the street again, the city looks the same, but it isn't. It's a web now, and she has learned where the threads hold. She moves like a rumor with feet, vanishing into alleys that remember her, reappearing where the city's map kisses the countryside. The first road north taught her how to run. Philadelphia has taught her how to return.
The coins are counted, the shawl folded, the bonnet tied low. Harriet steps out into the night, not running this time, but walking with purpose. This is not her escape anymore, it is her return. You feel the difference immediately. The first journey was fear and trembling. This one is weight, mission, a vow to the faces that haunt her dreams, her family, her friends, her people. Authoritative fact. Harriet Tubman made an estimated 13 trips back into slaveholding states after her own escape, rescuing around 70 enslaved people directly and giving instructions to many more who found freedom on their own. She never lost a single passenger. The road south is more dangerous than the road north ever was. She is no longer unknown. Runaway notices list her, and if caught, she could be beaten, sold, or killed. Yet she goes anyway, guided by visions, by memory, and by faith that God Himself is walking beside her. She whispers to the North Star again, the same star that carried her out, now her compass back in. Odd fact: Tubman often carried a revolver with her, not just to ward off slave catchers, but to prevent fear from unraveling the group. If anyone panicked and tried to turn back, she reportedly leveled the pistol and said firmly, "You'll be free or you'll die." That iron resolve was part of why she never lost a passenger. The cops still debate how much of her success was due to careful planning versus sheer providence. Her uncanny ability to avoid patrols, to change direction suddenly, to wait in silence until the road cleared. It all felt like she had intelligence networks the size of armies. She insisted it was God's hand, visions pressing into her mind at the right moments. You walk with her into Maryland swamps, where the air is thick, the ground soft. She leads barefoot families through water waist deep, moving silently while bullfrogs croak around them. She tells them to follow her steps exactly, never straying, never hesitating. At safe houses, she sings low spirituals to announce her arrival. "Go down, Moses," a coded hymn that both comforts and directs. The fugitives draw courage from her steady voice, even as their bodies shake with cold. Light joke number 1. You imagine Harriet today running a group chat. All right, everyone, turn off your location, delete your texts, and meet at the rendezvous point at 0200. Light joke number 2. You picture her explaining the rules to panicked travelers like a patient but terrifying tour guide. No bathroom breaks, snacks provided later, 5 stars on the Freedom app if you make it. Light joke number 3. You think of her carrying that revolver, and the Yelp review writes itself. Conductor was kind, knowledgeable, and slightly terrifying. Would recommend. Every journey back tests her body and mind. She works as a servant or laborer in free states to raise money, then plunges south again with nothing but grit and a pistol. She learns to use disguises, an old woman with a basket, a man with a hat pulled low. She memorizes train timetables, learns ferry schedules, maps rivers, memorizes where Quaker barns will shelter her passengers. Each trip, the path gets sharper, like a trail beaten smooth by faith. She rescues siblings first, then nieces, nephews, parents. Each time she arrives, whispers spread, "Moses is here." They call her Moses, for like the prophet of Scripture, she leads her people out of bondage. You hear the name whispered in reverence as she moves among them, a legend in her own lifetime, though she never seeks it. In Philadelphia or New Jersey, she watches families reunite, tears soaking the floorboards of safe houses. She smiles faintly, but already her mind is on the next journey. She cannot rest long while others remain behind. And you realize something. Harriet's freedom never belonged only to her. From the moment she crossed that first border, she understood that freedom is communal. If she is free, then they must be too. That vow becomes her engine, carrying her back into danger again and again, until her name alone becomes a promise in the dark.
The road is no longer a single escape. It's a rhythm now, a corridor carved into the night. You move with Harriet as she becomes not just a fugitive, but a conductor. Her life braided into the hidden rails of the Underground Railroad. She knows every code, every signal, every verse that means the difference between capture and freedom. Authoritative fact: the Underground Railroad was not a literal railroad, but a vast, clandestine network of safe houses, sympathetic families, coded songs, and brave guides. Harriet Tubman became one of its most famous conductors, leading group after group north to safety, each trip threading through swamps, rivers, and secret attics. She walks at night, feet sinking into damp earth, pointing always toward Polaris, the North Star, as if it were the lamp God hung just for her. During the day, fugitives hide in barns, cellars, even beneath floorboards, while she keeps watch with her pistol. She calms crying children with a lullaby, sometimes mixing a hymn with whispered instructions, reminding them that every step brings them closer to freedom. Odd fact to soften the edge: Harriet sometimes used the rhythms of popular hymns as secret codes. A line like "Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home" wasn't just spiritual comfort. It was a signal to prepare, to move, to follow. Even today, historians believe those songs carried more maps than most atlases. The cops still debate how she never lost a single passenger. Was it luck? Was it divine? Or was it simply her relentless preparation, knowing every swampy crossing, every Quaker farm that would open its doors, every town where slave catchers were thick as weeds? Most agree it was all three: luck, providence, and a will of iron. You watch her lead families through water up to their waists. Her own dress clings heavy, but her steps never falter. At crossroads, she waits silently for the night to grow deeper, then moves again. Her pistol gleams faintly when the moonlight hits, not aimed at enemies this time, but serving as a promise: no turning back. "You'll be free or you'll die," she warns softly, and the fugitives nod, fear replaced with determination. Light joke number 1. You picture Harriet as a modern GPS. In half a mile, turn left at the big oak tree. If you miss it, don't worry. I'll personally drag you back on course. Light joke number 2. Imagine her leading a Yelp-rated tour. 5 stars. Guide knew all the secret trails, complimentary hymns included. Light joke number 3. You think about her pistol and whisper, "Better customer service than Uber Eats." Each safe house greets her with candlelight and bread, families ushering fugitives in quickly before bolting the doors. Quakers in plain clothes bow their heads as Harriet enters, offering her food she often refuses so others can eat first. She thanks them, her voice low, but she never lingers. Too much time in one place is risk. She pushes forward, step after step, until the Mason-Dixon line is behind them, and the breath of freedom fills the lungs of those she led. You notice how her face changes in those moments. She rarely smiles, but her eyes soften when a child laughs for the first time in days, or when a mother clutches her child safe in free soil. She doesn't bask in triumph. She reloads her purpose. Even as one group collapses into safety, she is already plotting the return trip. Her reputation grows. They call her Moses. The name spreads like rumor and hymn. Enslaved people whisper it in the fields, passing it down like a password. Moses is real. She has come. She will come again. Slave catchers grow frustrated. Patrols increase. Rewards for her capture balloon. But still, she moves through the night, unseen, unstoppable, guided by visions and stars. You realize the Underground Railroad is not just rails and stops. It's a current of faith and defiance, a music of resistance, and Harriet Tubman is its heartbeat. Walking those trails so many times, she carves them into the very memory of the land.
The air thickens as you follow her deeper into the wetlands, where the cypress roots twist like knotted fists and the moonlight is swallowed by moss. This is the world Harriet knows best, the swamps, the marshes, the hidden channels where pursuit dogs lose their scent. She moves with the confidence of someone who has practiced in darkness all her life. For her passengers, each rustle is terror. For her, each rustle is data. She carries a pistol, yes, but the greater weapon is her resolve. The fugitives whisper of turning back, their voices fraying with fear, but she cuts them short. "You'll be free or you'll die," she says, quiet but firm. And the group steadies because her faith is larger than their fear. Authoritative fact: Tubman's journeys often wound through dangerous swamp country in Maryland and Delaware. She used natural cover to avoid patrols and sometimes led groups by water, waist deep, to evade dogs. She carried a revolver not only for protection against pursuers, but also to prevent wavering escapees from returning, because turning back meant betrayal of the whole group. Odd fact to sharpen the shadows: Tubman was a skilled herbalist. She learned remedies from her mother and from observing nature. She could calm a baby's cries with herbal mixtures, silence that sometimes meant the difference between discovery and survival. The cops still debate how much of her uncanny success was tactical knowledge versus those sudden visions she claimed were divine guidance. She would halt suddenly, insisting danger was ahead, only to discover patrols lying in wait exactly where she refused to go. Historians argue epilepsy or intuition. Her passengers believed it was God's voice itself. The swamp smells of mud and fear. Water sucks at shoes, insects sting, and the cries of owls echo. Harriet mimics the owl's call, a high, eerie note. To you, it seems ordinary bird song. To others in the night, it's a signal. Move now. Follow. Light joke number 1. You imagine her today running an escape through modern airports. Follow me, stay low. We'll bypass TSA with an owl call. Light joke number 2. You picture her as a wilderness guide on Yelp. Great conductor, knew every swamp, 5 stars, but too many mosquitoes. Light joke number 3. You think about her telling people not to panic, and in today's terms, that's basically the world's best motivational podcast. Her passengers stumble, whispering prayers, clinging to each other. She steadies them, whispering back the same prayer, but firmer, sharper, because in her mouth, prayer is also command. They press through the water, reach the far bank, and collapse, shivering. She lets them rest only long enough for silence to fold around them. Then she pulls them up, always forward, never back. You see how faith is her compass, not naive faith, but tested faith, the kind that has stared down whips, hunger, and iron weights to the head. She believes God is with her, and that conviction infects the group. They rise when they should fall. They step when they should freeze, because her belief feels stronger than their exhaustion. And here's the thing, you feel it too. Moving with her in the swamp, soaked to the bone, you believe that the darkness is not empty but full of guiding hands. You believe the pistol will not jam, the path will not close, the North Star will not dim, because Harriet Tubman believes it. And when she believes, you move. By dawn, they emerge from the marsh, dripping and ragged but alive. Birds stir. The first light paints the trees gold, and Harriet kneels in the mud for a brief prayer of thanks. Behind her, the fugitives collapse with relief, whispering her name like a secret spell. Moses. She stands, eyes already lifting north, ready to keep walking.
You walk beside her into a world where danger sharpens overnight. In 1850, Congress passes the Fugitive Slave Law, and suddenly the line between slave state and free state vanishes. You can almost feel the net tightening. Any enslaved person who escapes north can now be hunted, even in so-called free states, dragged back south by slave catchers with the law on their side. The reward posters grow larger, the patrols more vicious, the prisons more eager. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 required officials in free states to assist in the capture and return of escaped enslaved people, and punished anyone who aided them. For Harriet Tubman, it meant that even Pennsylvania was no longer safe. She extended her routes all the way to Canada, where slavery had been abolished in 1834. She adjusts quickly. Canada becomes her new North Star, and she leads her passengers through longer, colder journeys, sometimes hundreds of miles further, but safer in the end. She speaks of it with reverence. There are no slaves in Canada, she tells weary travelers, and the words are enough to pull them through frostbite and hunger. Odd fact to thread in. Harriet Tubman once said she never ran her train off the track and never lost a passenger. Imagine the confidence of claiming such a record when the stakes were lives every step of the way. Yet, history records her as speaking the truth. Dozens of trips, and not a single soul returned to bondage under her watch. The cops still debate how she managed to evade the intensified search after 1850, with rewards for her capture rising to extraordinary sums. Some reports said up to $40,000. Slave catchers had every reason to hunt her, but they never did. Some say it was her disguises, some her visions, some the sheer loyalty of those who sheltered her. Perhaps it was all three. The journey is longer now. You trudge with her through snow, through freezing rivers, through nights where stars blur from exhaustion. She pushes the group harder, her revolver still a silent promise. Children cry, but she hushes them with herbs and songs. Adults falter, but she steadies them with scripture and steel. They whisper Moses, not just as a name, but as a shield. You can imagine Harriet updating her travel blog. Route length, 500 miles. Terrain, swamps, rivers, snow. Rating, 0 out of 10. Would not recommend unless seeking freedom. Like joke number 2, you picture her giving a pep talk like a modern fitness coach. 1 more mile, you got this. Freedom is the ultimate cardio. Like joke number 3, you wonder if she ever rolled her eyes when people said, "I can't go on," because her look alone probably got them moving again. Safe houses still line the way. Quaker families, black churches, abolitionist networks. Each one risks everything by opening the door, but Harriet knows who can be trusted. She builds relationships, remembers names, builds a map of kindness stitched across hostile land. Every trip, she adds another waypoint, another ally, another miracle. You can feel how the Fugitive Slave Act didn't just increase the risk, it magnified the courage. Every journey north now is an act of defiance, not just against slaveholders, but against a nation's law. Harriet doesn't flinch. If the law is unjust, then the law is wrong, and her mission is higher than any legislature. And so you keep walking with her through the frozen night. The North Star glints. Canada lies ahead, further than ever, but real. Behind her, people whisper freedom like it's already in their lungs. Ahead of her, snow crunches, wolves howl, and the line of fugitives presses on, guided by the steady figure
who refuses to lose even one. You learn quickly that even a legend needs an address book. The road north is a braid of courage and kindness, and Harriet walks it with a list of names in her head like beads on a rosary. You follow her into parlors where carpets hush your steps, into kitchens where kettles hiss, into meeting houses where benches shine from 1,000 plain-clothed prayers. Allies open doors in the dark and say nothing loud. That's how this orchestra plays, soft, precise, together. William Still of Philadelphia, the clerk of the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society, kept meticulous records of fugitives who passed through the Vigilance Committee, noting names, origins, destinations, and the helpers along the way. His ledger became a kind of atlas of deliverance. And in Wilmington, Delaware, the Quaker merchant Thomas Garrett, broad-shouldered kindness in a wide-brimmed hat, helped thousands move through his town, boasting later that he had never turned a person from his door. Between Still's pen and Garrett's open-handed courage, the line from Maryland to Pennsylvania gets firmer under Harriet's feet. You stand in Still's office, the ink smell like new rain, and listen while Harriet speaks in her low, steady voice. She doesn't explain herself, she names needs. 1 wagon at midnight, a cellar for 3 nights, a sack of meal, children's shoes, $5 more than she has. Still nods, writes, dispatches. His pen is a lantern. Papers rustle, coins slide across the desk, and Harriet wraps them in her shawl as if tucking them under a wing. Then you're in Wilmington, where Thomas Garrett's handshake is as blunt and honest as an anvil. He greets Harriet as sister, because that's what you call someone you trust with your sleep. His house is a station the way a heartbeat is a drum. Men glance from windows, women pack bread and dried apples, and upstairs a bed frame already knows the weight of people who must not be seen by noon. Garrett sends a message ahead, 1 more group tonight, and the road quickens like a pulse receiving news. Odd, off-topic fact to blink at between dangers, traditional Quaker dress avoided flashy buttons, favoring simple hooks and eyes. You smile thinking how appropriate that is here. Hooks and eyes, fasteners that hold a garment together quietly, the way this network fastens people to safety without show. The list goes longer and farther. In New York State, you knock at the Rochester home of Frederick Douglass, the man whose voice booms even when he whispers. His parlor smells of tea and printer's ink, and his laugh is a bell you want to keep hearing. He feeds the travelers, gives Harriet what money he can, and offers contacts farther on. He calls her General later, half in jest, wholly in respect. In Peterborough, you find Gerrit Smith with his abolitionist generosity, land grants and open purses, a rich man who decided his riches belonged to the Revolution. At meetings in Pennsylvania and New York, Lucretia Mott and other Quaker women press Harriet's hands and press money into them too, small sums that weigh like anchors in her palm. Light joke number 1. If there were a loyalty program for safe houses, Harriet would be platinum tier for life. Free upgrades to attic suites, late checkout at dawn, complimentary hymns in the lobby. But this isn't charity theater, it's logistics. Letters move by careful hands, writers pass notes pinned under saddles, church deacons cough at specific times. A lantern in the basement window means wait. A lantern in the attic window means come. Bread is sliced thick to hide messages. Babies are rocked to a rhythm that ticks time until the next wagon. People who never met before move as if they've practiced for years. Either you believe in miracles, or you admit that rehearsal can happen across miles when the conductor's name is courage. The cops still debate whether Harriet's success rode mostly on the strength of this network or on her visions that made maps out of danger. Scholars argue the numbers, how many went north on her arm alone, how many on routes her advice opened. They split hairs over totals and timetables, reward posters and reminiscences. Meanwhile, you're standing in a doorway at midnight, watching a woman pass 3 children into Harriet's arms without a sound. The ledger of the moment outshouts every footnote. You travel farther with her, over the border to St. Catharines, Canada West, now Ontario, where the air itself seems surprised by how many people breathe freely. Here, the black community builds churches and schools, and the floorboards do not creak under the weight of terror. Harriet rents rooms, cooks for the newly arrived, and learns which mills are hiring. She becomes a hinge, swinging south to fetch, swinging north to settle, and the door she makes keeps opening. Light joke number 2. If GoFundMe existed, her page would read, goal, freedom, budget, everything, perks, breathing. You notice what never changes. Even among friends, she keeps her hat low, her sentences economical, her eyes on the clock. Allies are precious, but risk is arithmetic. She never stays long, she thanks quickly, and she leaves before gratitude can become a party. When cash runs thin, she hires out again, hotels along the Jersey Shore, kitchens, laundries, then turns those wages back into miles. Everyone tries to feed her, she pushes her plate away when there isn't enough for the smallest child. Remember the oysters in Philadelphia? She still walks past pleasures like they're decoys. In a plain meeting house, you sit with Quakers as silence gathers like a quilt. No sermon, just breath and wood and the occasional cough that lifts like a sparrow. Harriet sits among them with her eyes half closed, and you see how this quiet suits her, a pocket big enough to hold God. When the silence breaks, it breaks into practicalities. Who will drive? Who will hide? Who will watch? Peace here does not mean inactivity, it means aim. Odd glint of humanity. Frederick Douglass, lion of oratory, also loved to play the violin. Picture him setting the bow down, listening to Harriet lay out a route in under 30 words, then picking the bow up again to play something that sounds like a door unlocking. Allies aren't only famous. There is a midwife whose porch always creaks once when it is safe and twice when it is not. There is a dock worker who coughs into his sleeve when the wrong foreman patrols the wharf. A teenage boy who runs messages faster than rumor. A white farmer who leaves a spade leaning against a fence post, handle pointing east if patrols are heavy, west if the road is clear. A baker who wraps loaves in yesterday's news, so headlines can travel as far as hunger does. Add them to the rosary. Light joke number 3. If Harriet had a smartphone, her contacts app would be terrifying. Just first names and directions like Samuel, knock thrice, left hinge squeaks, but where dog? You still hear dissent even among friends. Some want her to slow down, to stop risking herself, to speak more, to travel less. Some urge speeches for money instead of missions for danger. She hears them, nods once, and leaves for the marshes again. She says, I can't rest. You believe her because rest for her is not sleep, but arrival. Rest is the word you use when the last person steps over the threshold into light. And then there is the tall man with fire in his eyes and maps of Virginia and Missouri spread over his table, John Brown. He will be a thunderhead on her horizon soon enough, a question she will answer with both zeal and caution. For now, you only notice how the room warms with strategy when she enters, how even the bold learn to speak in the key of her certainty. By the time the candles gutter and the last kitchen door closes, you've met a small nation, the Republic of Hands. None of them carries a flag, all of them carry the same flame. You step back into the night with Harriet, coins tight in her shawl, routes tightened in her mind, and you feel how this war, long before uniforms and drums, is already being won by a federation of quiet. She lifts her face, hears an owl, answers it. Somewhere, a Quaker woman sets a kettle to boil and a trap door to lift. Somewhere, William Still slides a fresh sheet into his ledger. Somewhere, Thomas Garrett spreads his big hands like gates. You walk, and the road feels less lonely. Not because danger has lessened, but because the company has grown. For every mile that hates her, there is a doorway that loves her back.
You step into the 1860s with her, and the air itself tastes different. Gunpowder, smoke, the bitter breath of war. The Union and the Confederacy are locked in blood, and Harriet Tubman, once the shadowy Moses of the Underground Railroad, now moves openly as a weapon of the Union cause. You follow her past camps where soldiers drill, past fires that crackle against the night, past tents where wounded men groan. She walks through it all with the same steady gait she used in the swamps. Purpose first, fear never. Authoritative fact. During the Civil War, Harriet Tubman worked for the Union Army as a cook, nurse, scout, and spy. She was the first woman in American history to lead an armed expedition in war, gathering intelligence and guiding raids that liberated hundreds of enslaved people. Her espionage begins quietly. She slips through Confederate lines disguised as a washerwoman, carrying laundry baskets that hide messages, noting troop positions, counting cannons and rifles, listening to soldiers boast over fires about their commanders' plans. At night, she brings this intelligence to Union officers, her memory sharper than any map. They marvel at her precision. How many tents in which camp? How many men stationed along a riverbank? She doesn't boast, doesn't dramatize. She simply tells them what she saw. Odd fact to keep your eyes sharp. Tubman once baked pies and sold root beer near Confederate camps, not for profit, but as cover while she gathered intelligence. Imagine a general underestimating the pie woman, who was in fact planning his undoing. The cops still debate how formal her spy role was, whether she was officially commissioned or simply tolerated by Union officers eager for intelligence. But the results are undeniable. Her information saved lives, and her raids crippled Confederate supply lines. You watch her move through swamps again, this time with Union scouts at her side. She knows the terrain better than they ever could. When she says stop, they stop. When she says move, they move. It's the Underground Railroad all over again, only now the passengers are soldiers, and the mission is not just escape, but victory. Light joke number 1. You imagine her running a Yelp review for Confederate camps. Poor sanitation, troop morale low, cannons badly placed. 2 stars, would not recommend. Light joke number 2. You picture her in a modern espionage scene, calmly outsmarting GPS trackers and drones with the same owl call she used decades earlier. Light joke number 3. You imagine her carrying pies into a spy movie scene. James Bond wishes he had cover that clever. Her legend grows among Union troops. They call her General Tubman, not as a joke, but as recognition. She moves between ranks with authority, her presence both humbling and electrifying. Soldiers straighten when she walks past because she radiates the kind of confidence that comes only from living through storms fiercer than war. She isn't only gathering intelligence, she's shaping strategy. She knows where enslaved people can be rallied, where local guides can be trusted, where supplies can be seized. She explains to officers that the enslaved population isn't just labor for the Confederacy, it's the Confederacy's Achilles heel. Free them and you weaken the enemy. Enlist them and you strengthen the Union. You realize this is Harriet's life in a new key. The same mission, larger scale. Where she once rescued handfuls by night, she now envisions hundreds freed by coordinated strikes. Where she led small groups through marshes, she now guides battalions. The thread is the same. It's always liberation. Night falls, and you watch her by the campfire. her face lit by flame, her hands busy preparing medicine from roots and herbs. She murmurs a prayer over the wounded, mixes remedies to ease pain, and then, when asked about tomorrow's mission, speaks in precise sentences, no wasted words. You feel the Union officers watching her, not as a curiosity, but as a commander. And for the first time, Harriet Tubman is no longer just Moses in the shadows. She is a general in the open, and the war is her battlefield.
You're with her now on the banks of South Carolina's Combahee River, June 1863, and the night is swollen with heat, frogs, and the low hum of waiting men. The Union gunboats drift in the water like dark hulks, lanterns snuffed, crews whispering nervously. Harriet Tubman stands at the prow, shawl pulled tight, her eyes on the current. The men glance at her, this small woman, barely 5 feet tall, scar on her forehead, pistol at her side, and you can feel their surprise that the general they've been told about looks like this. But she does not fidget. She waits, calm as the river itself. On June 2nd, 1863, Harriet Tubman became the first woman to lead an armed military expedition in U.S. history. She guided 3 Union gunboats up the Combahee River, directing troops in a raid that destroyed Confederate supplies and liberated more than 700 enslaved people in a single night. The plan is simple but perilous. The gunboats must slip past Confederate mines and patrols, then land troops to torch plantations and free the enslaved. Tubman has gathered the intelligence herself, speaking with locals, scouting the riverbanks, memorizing the channels like she once memorized swamp trails back in Maryland. Every twist of the current is printed in her mind. Odd fact, when Union officers doubted her, Tubman replied with such confidence in her scouting that they relented. And she was right. Her knowledge of tidal waters and hidden fords proved more reliable than any map. The boats move forward. You hear the creak of wood, the splash of oars muffled in cloth. Tubman leans over the rail, whispering to the pilot, "Starboard, not port, shoals there." Her voice is low, but it carries command. The men obey without question. Suddenly, the plantations erupt in chaos. Union troops storm ashore, torches blazing. Enslaved people pour out of cabins, eyes wide, voices shouting. Mothers clutch babies, fathers carry children, elderly stumble with tears streaming. Harriet stands tall on the deck, shouting above the din, "Come on, come with us!" Her voice cuts through smoke and panic. Hundreds rush to the boats, some wading waist-deep into the river, hands outstretched, faces lit by firelight and hope. The cops still debate how many exactly were freed. Estimates range from 700 to 750, but the raid was a triumph. Not a single Union life lost, Confederate infrastructure crippled, and hundreds of new soldiers ready to fight for freedom. Tubman's role was undeniable. Without her intelligence, her leadership, and her unshakable will, the raid could not have succeeded. Light joke number 1. You imagine Harriet filling out her resume after the war. Skills: escaping slavery, running an underground liberation network, leading amphibious military raids. References: God. Light joke number 2. You picture modern action movies trying to capture this scene and realizing Harriet outshines every fictional hero. Light joke number 3. You wonder if the Union officers who doubted her ever admitted later,
Yeah, she definitely knew the river better than we knew our own boots. As the boats pull away, the decks are crammed with men, women, and children, voices rising in jubilation. Harriet moves among them, comforting the frightened, steadying the wounded, reminding them all, "You're free now." You see in her eyes that this moment is the culmination of everything. Every night in the swamp, every whispered hymn, every risk of capture. Where once she rescued groups of 10 or 12, tonight she has delivered hundreds. When the boats reach Union lines, cheers erupt. Soldiers salute her. Officers shake her hand. But Harriet doesn't bask. She kneels beside an elderly woman shivering on the deck, wraps her shawl around her shoulders, and whispers words of comfort. For her, glory is not in the headlines, it is in the faces of the freed. And as the smoke from burning plantations drifts into the night sky, you realize Harriet Tubman is no longer just Moses leading her people out of bondage. She is General Tubman, a commander who struck a blow so mighty it echoed across the war.
The war ends with bugles and broken flags, but Harriet's work does not. You walk with her into a quieter battlefield, the years after 1865, when freedom is legal, but poverty and prejudice gnaw at the edges of every victory. The plantations are broken, the Confederacy crushed, but the people who were freed still struggle to find homes, food, and dignity in a land that barely acknowledges their humanity. Harriet doesn't retreat into rest, she dives into service. Authoritative fact. After the Civil War, Harriet Tubman settled in Auburn, New York, on land purchased with the help of abolitionist Senator William H. Seward. There she opened her doors to freedmen, orphans, and the elderly, running what amounted to an informal community shelter. Later, she established the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged, ensuring care for those who had nowhere else to turn. She tends her garden, rows of beans and cabbages bending under her hands. She sells produce, bakes pies, takes in laundry, whatever earns a little money. She's not above small jobs. Every coin means another meal for someone in need. She still gives away more than she keeps. The general, who never lost a passenger, now refuses to lose a neighbor. Odd fact: Harriet was also an enthusiastic supporter of women's suffrage. She spoke at rallies alongside Susan B. Anthony and other leaders, though she never saw herself as polished. She would simply rise, lean on a cane, and speak plainly. "I suffered enough to believe women should have their rights too." The crowds always listened. The cops still debate how she managed financially, because records show she lived in near poverty much of her later life. Despite her service to the Union Army, she struggled for decades to receive a military pension. Some argue it was bureaucracy, others that it was discrimination. What's certain is that Harriet Tubman, who once led soldiers into battle, now relied on the generosity of friends and neighbors to survive. She walks through Auburn streets with the same gait she once used in the swamps, steady, determined. Children follow her, not out of fear, but curiosity. They hear the stories whispered, the woman who carried a pistol, who followed stars, who led armies. She smiles at them, gives them apples from her garden, tells them to keep studying. Light joke number 1. You imagine Harriet today on Kickstarter. Stretch goal, feed 20 neighbors. Bonus reward, eternal gratitude. Light joke number 2. You picture her at a suffrage rally saying,
If I can face dogs and rifles, I can certainly face a ballot box. Light joke number 3. You imagine her running a modern nonprofit. Her slogan would be blunt: freedom first, snacks second. Her Auburn home becomes a beacon. Freed people with no place to go find shelter in her rooms. The elderly poor, both black and white, sit at her table. She feeds them with food grown by her own hands, blesses them with the same faith that guided her through rivers and raids. Even when her body aches, when seizures still strike, she pushes forward. Service, to her, is freedom extended. In quieter moments, she sits by her window, Bible open, lips moving in prayer. Her life has always been a dialogue with God, and old age does not close the conversation. She asks less for herself now, more for the generations to come. Strength for them, courage for them, light for them to follow when she is gone. And as you watch her move through these years, no longer hiding in swamps or commanding soldiers, but hoeing gardens, cooking meals, rocking orphans, you realize the thread is unbroken. Whether in battle or in peace, Harriet Tubman has always been the same, a woman who carries others forward, refusing to leave anyone behind.
You follow her now into the twilight of her years, when her steps slow but her presence grows larger, rooted like an oak. Harriet Tubman is no longer the fugitive in the swamps or the general at the riverbanks. She is Aunt Harriet to everyone who passes through Auburn, New York. Her small wooden house smells of bread and herbs, its porch crowded with neighbors seeking advice, stories, or simply her blessing. Authoritative fact: in 1908, the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged officially opened on land next to her Auburn residence. Funded partly by donations and partly by her tireless work, the home provided shelter and care for elderly African Americans who had nowhere else to go. Harriet herself lived there in her final years, surrounded by the community she had built. She tends to the residents as if they were family. She rocks elders in chairs, prays over the sick, and tells stories to children who sneak in to hear the legend firsthand. She never grows vain about her past. When asked, she only says, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." She offers it like a fact of housekeeping, not heroism. Odd fact: in 1913, when she was in her 90s, Tubman underwent brain surgery at Boston's Massachusetts General Hospital to relieve the pain from her childhood head injury. She reportedly refused anesthesia, instead biting a bullet as soldiers once did. The image is stark, a reminder of the pain she had carried since that iron weight struck her skull as a girl. The cops still debate why it took until the 1890s for Harriet Tubman to receive any pension for her Civil War service. Some records suggest bureaucratic oversight, others argue racial and gender discrimination. What's undeniable is that she finally received a modest pension, first as the widow of a soldier, then eventually for her own service, far less than she deserved. Neighbors describe her old age as luminous. They recall her seated by the window, Bible in her lap, humming spirituals that still carried coded echoes of the railroad days. They recall her laughter, sharp and sudden, and her discipline, still fierce enough to keep children polite. She remains poor in money, but rich in honor, visited by suffragists, ministers, and even school children who bow before the living monument in their town. Like joke number 1, you imagine Harriet scolding doctors today. Anesthesia? I said a bullet will do. Light joke number 2, you picture her turning down offers of retirement. Retired? I've got neighbors to feed and prayers to say. Light joke number 3, you imagine her lecturing modern politicians. If you can't run a country without losing passengers, you've no business running it. The home she founded is not fancy, plain rooms, creaking floors, but it radiates dignity. To the forgotten, it is sanctuary. To Harriet, it is fulfillment. Her mission has always been to bring people safely across. Whether across rivers, borders, or the slow river of age, she still guides them, still holds them until they can rest. At night, she walks slowly from room to room, checking on her boarders. She touches a shoulder here, adjusts a blanket there, murmurs a prayer as she goes. She has spent a lifetime keeping watch, and she refuses to stop, even when her own body weakens. And as you sit beside her, listening to her hum an old hymn, you realize Harriet Tubman is no longer only the conductor of the Underground Railroad. She is the Saint of Auburn, revered in life, carrying her people still, not just through swamps and wars, but through poverty, sickness, and the long twilight years of a hard-earned freedom.
The room is quiet now. The lamps low, the air soft with the smell of wood smoke and linens. Harriet Tubman lies in her bed at the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged, the very place she built for others. Her hands are folded, knuckles worn from decades of labor, veins raised like rivers that once carried whole nations forward. Outside, the wind rattles branches against the window. Inside, her voice, faint but steady, whispers scripture, "I go to prepare a place for you." She is surrounded not by wealth or fine things, but by the people she spent her life serving. Former boarders from the home gather around, neighbors visit to pray, and children sneak in to glimpse her one last time. They call her Aunt Harriet, the name of affection that suits her far better than any title. She receives them all with the same calm she carried through swamps and battlefields. Odd fact, in her final days, Harriet gave away most of what little she owned. She believed that nothing belonged to her but her mission, and even at the end, she lived simply. Her wealth measured not in coins, but in souls saved and lives changed. The cops still debate whether she fully grasped in those last moments how monumental her life was. Did she know she had become a legend already? Did she know her name would be etched into schools, bridges, and history books? Or did she only know that she had done the work given to her, and that was enough? You imagine Harriet looking at the angel sent to collect her soul and saying, "Don't lose any passengers on the way." You picture her meeting George Washington in heaven and remarking, "Nice work, but I did it without losing a single one." You imagine her wagging a finger at St. Peter. "Check your books carefully because I've been running my own up here for years." As her breathing slows, you sense the rhythm of her life still pulsing beneath. The footsteps in the swamp, the hymns whispered under stars, the shouts of joy on Union gunboats, the laughter of children in Auburn. She has always been moving people from one place to another, out of bondage, into safety, through hardship, toward dignity. And now she is moving herself into the freedom she has believed in all along. When she passes, the room is hushed, but it does not feel empty. It feels like the end of a hymn, the final note held long enough to settle in your bones. The woman born into chains, struck down by iron, guided by stars and visions, feared by masters, loved by the people she carried. Harriet Tubman is gone from the earth, but she leaves behind a current of courage that hums through generations. She was the general who never lost a passenger, and even now, she hasn't. So now the lamps dim, the hymn fades, and we step back from the long road we've walked with Harriet Tubman. You've traveled with her through fields of bondage, felt the iron weight that scarred her forehead, heard the whispers of escape that blossomed into daring flight. You followed her feet through swamps, rivers, and midnight forests, seeing her hand steady as she led men, women, and children into the safety of dawn. You stood with her in Philadelphia as she remade herself, Harriet, and watched her vow that freedom was not enough if it was hers alone. You walked with her as she became Moses of her people, revolver in hand, hymns on her lips, never once losing a passenger. You saw the danger intensify after the Fugitive Slave Act, the network of allies expanding, Quakers and abolitionists fastening a nation together with quiet bravery. Then came the war, and Harriet stepped onto a new stage, spy, nurse, and general, guiding raids like the Combahee River expedition that freed hundreds at once. No longer hidden, she commanded openly, her legend acknowledged by soldiers and officers alike. And in peace, she did not retire, but continued her mission in Auburn, feeding the hungry, sheltering the poor, speaking for women's rights, building a home for the aged. She gave away more than she kept, living simply while lifting others until her last breath. So, let the last image soften. Harriet Tubman, in her final bed, Bible open, whispering scripture as the wind rustles outside. The woman born into chains, struck down by iron, guided by stars and visions, feared by masters, loved by the people she carried, Harriet Tubman is gone from the earth, but she leaves behind a current of courage that hums through generations. She was the general who never lost a passenger, and even now, she hasn't. Good night.